Alright, so this area right here behind me is just a tiny little triangle section of standing rye. You can see this stuff just exploded and is really impressive. I mean, this stuff's almost 6 feet tall, real thick. This was actually corn and soybeans last year, a little bit of both. And I got the planter here and four-wheeler there. I'm going to be planting all this into corn. I got this spot and one other little spot that I'm going to do in this video. And this is a poor man's no-till. I got just an old generic two-row planter that my grandpa used for many, many years. This is meant to be used, you know, on plowed and disked ground. But last year was the first year I tried using it in the corn, in the rye, and the corn came up real good. The soybeans were a little deep, and they came up, but the deer just completely wiped them out. But the corn turned out fantastic this way, so that's why this year I'm going to do all corn in these two little spots. And I've been planting soybeans, just broadcasting them by hand into the standing rye and crushing it all down for many years, and have had really good results with beans when you get them in thicker. But with the corn planter, it just put them in a little deep, and they weren't quite as thick as what they should have been. So if I ever want to do soybeans with this method, I'm going to stick with just the broadcasting and crushing right before a heavy rain. And I've been waiting to plant this spot, but we haven't had rain forever because the ground was pretty dry and pretty hard underneath all this. Now that we've had a little bit of rain, the ground is moist enough for this planter to be able to get the corn in the ground. And it actually does a pretty decent job of covering it up. Well, at least it did last year. We'll see what it does. It's pretty amazing that this planter, these discs have a lot of mud on them right now, but this is just sharp enough to cut through all that and get the seed in the soil and covered up. It's amazing how good a job this thing does just without being a no-till planter. And it helps. I planted all the other corn and all the other soybeans with the tractor because the hitch is a little higher. You can see it's not quite level. This is like a dropped hitch on the four-wheeler. The tractor is a little bit more level, and we can even adjust the hitch on the tractor to go up a little bit more for when we plant soybeans to not put them as deep. But for this, I want it to be as deep and as much downward pressure. It's amazing. You wouldn't think that the adjustment height, the hitch, would affect the seed depth, but over what is this, probably 4 or 5 years of planting with this planter and using the four-wheeler sometimes, using the tractor sometimes, you get an idea, get used to your equipment, I guess. And the four-wheeler, this method definitely does plant it deeper, so this is what I'm using. So I'll start planting here, and I'll show you after a couple passes what it starts to look like. And I probably won't get to crushing it all down. The planter and four-wheeler is only going to do, you know, 25% wherever the wheels go through. That's where it's going to be crushed down. I'm going to have to come back tomorrow and cultipack it all down and spray it. I'm going to have time, just enough time to plant these two spots tonight, I think. So I'm just going to shut up and start doing it. So this stuff's actually crushing better than I expected for just one pass. Usually this rye does crush a little better when it's real tall like this. Sometimes in shadier areas or drier soil, it doesn't get quite as tall and quite as thick. So let's see if we can find a row in here. The row should be like right here somewhere. Not quite seeing it. Super odd. Oh, it's gotta be right here. The ground is kind of broken apart. Yep, right here. So there you can see a seed that's kind of on the soil. That's not good. Right there's another one. And right here's another one. So the ground does feel a little hard yet underneath here, but right here I'm not seeing any. They must have got a little deeper right here. You see this corn thatch in here? This is some corn stalks. This planter does have enough downward pressure and sharp enough blades that they literally just chopped right through that and planted right through that. And then right here's a couple more. So it's not doing as quite a good a job as I remember last year, but I gotta remember I still gotta crush a lot of this down. And this row is pretty much underneath a lot of this thick green rye. I mean, it looks like we're gonna get a lot of rain, potentially Saturday or Sunday, and even into Monday. So if we get a good ½ inch of rain, this seed that's like in the soil, half wet, half somewhat, like right here, it's pretty well covered. So yeah, this is looking like it's gonna work. But man, if we went a long time without rain, you'd probably get some pretty spotty germination. Like, see these ones, these aren't gonna do that good. But after I drive through here a bunch more with the 4-wheeler and cultipacker, it should kind of like, you know, just the vibration and driving over here, packing it down even some more, should hopefully get some of this seed a little bit more set in the soil. This other row right here actually looks a little better. I was looking at this one, and you can see some of the seed right there. And it's doing a much better job of like closing the row and getting the corn deeper. Like, I don't see any. Right here, some corn seed. This crack in the ground will get somewhat covered up from me driving around in here, and there must be more seed right down in here in the row. I just can't see it. Right here's one, but all along here I don't see much. This row looks a little better. Well, here's spot number 2. This is just a real long, narrow plot, and then it gets a little bigger right here. This is the spot where I did this last year. I had 2 rows of corn in the middle for a test, and then the rest of it I just drilled in the beans. And like I said, I think there's a doe every year, or a couple does that have fawns like right in here somewhere, and they just hammered the beans, wiped them out almost completely. There was only a couple up here that survived all the browse, but the corn did really good. You can kind of, right here's where I had the corn actually, kind of maybe not in the middle, but more on this edge. There's a few corn stalks right here. You can see again, it sliced right through that perfectly. So here's a better look at what it looks like. You see the seed right there, another one right here. And then this is what it looks like after. This ground is definitely pretty hard right here. So this is like right where the row is. I'm not seeing hardly any seed. Right here's one. See, it's a little shallow, obviously, but there is some making it, you know, probably an inch or better down. Then you factor in all the rock. This isn't even the thickest spot. This is a drier edge. This row is not doing the best for covering up. Let me show you what some of those rows look like once we get up there. So this right here gives you a better look at what it looks like. You can see the seed right there. There's 3 of them right there. There's one right back there. So you can see right here the soil's damp enough where it's cutting in pretty good. But right up there it was putting it in a little shallow. And this rise thicker here too. And then right behind the planter, this is right where the row is. So when the planter gets done, it's already crushed down right where the row is. Granted, I'm going to come back through and crush the rest of this down, but right where this row is, this should all come up right here. I'm not seeing anything exposed. It's all deep enough and then loose enough ground right here. But like I said, right back there, it was pretty dry. So I'm glad I waited for a rain to plant this. Otherwise, this whole area would have been dry. So that's just one pass right there, and then one pass right here. This stuff's crushing down really nice. Here we are, second update of the video. This stuff looks amazing. I'm very, very impressed how well the weeds have been kept back by the rye and the simazine. The simazine's probably what's holding back most of the weeds, because I did this, like I said, in the other plot, the skinny narrow plot over that way, corn and beans last year. Man, there was surprisingly a lot of lamb's quarters weeds that popped up through this rye thatch, but I didn't spray any simazine on that last year because I had that primarily as soybeans and a little bit of corn in that last year. But this area corn and the other area corn I'll take you to next, I sprayed simazine on both areas the day I planted. There's a few sporadic water hemp or pigweed plants in here, this being probably the largest one. I mean hardly any. I mean, I could just go through here for 5 minutes and hand weed some of these bigger ones, and pretty much that'll be it. I didn't spray this. I didn't have to post-emerge spray this with glyphosate at all. Just basically drilled it in, crushed it all down, sprayed it with simazine, and then this is where I'm at. Didn't really do anything since then. So this corn's definitely quite a ways behind. It's only about waist high. You can see my corn over there, man. That stuff's tasseling out already. That's the one downfall to this rye method. I mean, I suppose you could plant earlier, but if you plant when the rye is only about knee high, you're not going to really be able to crush it down, because it's going to want to spring back up. This stuff was so stocky and so tall, it was super easy to crush down, get it like a green carpet, spray it, and it stays down. I mean, I could try planting it earlier maybe, but like I said, you're not going to get it to crush down as nice. Yeah, look at this. There's like nothing coming up. I mean, right here is a little tiny weed, but that's not going to amount to anything. And if you look in here, there's not even, holy crap, there's a toad right there. But there really isn't any weeds starting at all. I mean, I've sprayed simazine on some of my tilled up areas, and you still get a few weeds, but I mean, this is incredibly good weed suppression right here. Those pre-emergent herbicides are way more important than any post-emerge herbicide you can spray. You can see all the corn thatch in here from last year still. This plot, like I said, was about half and half corn and soybeans. There was a lot of volunteer corn that came back. There was enough volunteer corn to actually amount to something. It was able to tassel out and pollinate and produce something. And the soybeans, this was kind of a weedy plot last year, and surprisingly there's hardly anything coming up this year. All right, enough talk. I'll take you out to the next plot. All right, so here we are on the other plot. You can see, like, this is the plot I had the 2 rows of corn as a test, and then on each side the rest of the plot being soybeans. Last year the soybeans were a failure. The deer just nipped them off, and they just never really, they got planted too deep. This method with the 4-wither and the dropped hitch, it plants the corn at the perfect depth on this no-till, but the beans just didn't work out with this rye method. Planted right through all this stuff. You can see this corn along this edge right here is definitely a little shorter, and I'd say this plot overall is probably a little smaller, and I'm seeing a little bit more yellow. Maybe a lack of nitrogen or something. I didn't even fertilize either one of these plots. Up here, it's got the most sun. I'm assuming it's probably looking better up here. We'll see when we get up here. I got a few tighter rows in here just to kind of like help canopy this over quicker. Actually, now that I think about it, there's actually probably even less weeds in here. Now I'm walking up here. Man, last year, man, I had a heck of a time, because last year I sprayed no pre-emergent. I came in here, I put the 2 rows of corn right to the center, and I drilled the rest of it into beans, and no pre-emergent. Man, I was just fighting weeds all year long. The beans never got going. Right here's a weed. I was fighting weeds all year long. I sprayed this like 2 or 3 times last year. The beans never even got going, never canopied over, hardly produced anything. So I came in here, I broadcasted brassica super thick. Well, it came in good. I had to put it in really thick because I didn't really get good seed to soil contact with all this rye here. And then in September, I came in and I had to throw a whole bunch of rye down to even get, you know, this rye to come up this spring here, because that's the problem with doing it this way. When you just broadcast the rye, you really can't do this year after year after year, because how am I supposed to get good seed to soil contact if I were to come in here this fall and put the rye in? I mean, there's just so much rye. This is the second year. This right here is probably from last year, some of this stuff underneath this. And then this is the stuff from this spring that I crushed down. But that's the problem doing it this way. You can't, I mean, you'd have to literally come in here with the drill after you were to harvest this. Like if you were planting this for ag, you have to harvest the corn, drill in the rye, and then drill in the corn or beans next year. Since I'm just broadcasting this rye and letting this corn stand for the deer, I can't really do this 2 or 3 years. 2 years in a row is stretching it, because I had to broadcast the rye super thick in here to get this this rye to germinate. The first spot I was at, that was all tilled in the spring, and I broadcast that at the normal rate. That stuff came in even thicker than this stuff was. You can see what that plot looked like. But man, it's actually looking kind of weak up here. Probably really lacking a lot of nitrogen or something. Look at how small this is. I know it's always drier right here on this end. That tree kind of blew down this spring, but thankfully it didn't hit my hybrid poplar here. But yeah, it's definitely drier. I knew it was definitely gonna be drier up on this end here. But yeah, I probably should have broadcasted some fertilizer, but this really ain't the end of the world if this doesn't produce much. I got so much other food on the farm this year, or every year I should say. I'm just really surprised how well this rye mixed with the pre-emerge herbicide holds back these weeds. You see all these dead all these dead mare's tail plants. These mare's tail plants are pretty hard to kill. I sprayed, I went over this edge right here with the sprayer like 2-3 times to really make sure I got this mare's tail dead good. All right, so here I am in the long narrow plot. It's looking fantastic. For some reason, this side over here looks better. Down there where the plot actually opens up and gets a little bit wider, that soil's not quite as good there, and you'll see when I get over there, the corn is noticeably like half the size. I actually threw some urea on here. This is one of my few corn plots that I actually threw some extra nitrogen and urea on. Probably, I don't know, maybe close to a month ago before a big rainstorm. Because I know this winter rye is gonna, you know, that sucks up a lot of nutrients in the spring. But you can see all this rye is still here. You can see the corn thatch from last year. And believe it or not, look at the weeds in here. I never even sprayed it. And in most of this plot, I just got a few thistles, dandelions, and a little bit of grass right in here. There's very little, if any, broadleafs. And same thing in the other plot you'll see next. And still, in this full sun right here, kind of this little open spot, there's nothing even trying to come up. Maybe like one little weed here. In the last 2 years prior to this, well, last year I did have a lot of weed issues in here, but I did not put a pre-emerge down. That last year I had, like I said, 2 rows of corn, and then the rest beans in here. I had no pre-emerge down, and man, I was battling weeds all year long. Water hemp and lamb's quarters that just kept germinating and coming up through this rye. So people say that rye suppresses weeds so well. Well, I'm here to tell you that you're just fooling yourself, because the only thing that's going to suppress weeds, whether you're doing no-till or tillage, is going to be a pre-emerge herbicide. Because this is the proof right here. I should put up some pictures if I have some, but last year, like I said, I was pulling out and battling the weeds all year long, and it's doing the same method in the same plot. And in those weedy sections, I ended up, like I said, hand pulling and spraying, and I put that into brassica later in the summer. But with this pre-emerge down, man, it's a totally different story. You can see the corn is kind of at peak pollination here, dropping all kinds of pollen. It's gonna get dry and hot next week, so this probably isn't the best time of the year for this corn to be pollinating. This stuff, you know, like I said, is planted a little bit later. It's going to be 90s next week. I mean, most of it is at least 8 feet or higher. You can see we got some shade right here, so this ain't gonna be the best looking corn, but I'm just so amazed what the weeds look like here. It's just nothing. Obviously here it's pretty short. And I got these rows quite thick in here because, you know, this be a no-till. I'm not gonna cultivate this or worry about having the right spacing for the cultivator. So I'm just, I got, you know, probably like a 20-inch row here. Kind of a tighter row here. So, and just look at down here. There's a couple water hemp right here. See that? And by the time they came up, I mean, this corn was probably already waist high, because just judging by how small those weeds are. Well, right here is where it really drops off. You can see up here, I don't know why this section is so small. All that looks really good. This is probably, you know, the sunniest part of the whole plot out here. And man, these plants aren't even gonna do much of anything probably. I put a lot of extra urea right here and it did nothing. So it's obviously a potassium deficiency or something. I know this soil is usually a little bit drier here and than that soil going that way, but it's all pretty similar stuff. But you can see it's just night and day difference. I don't know what would be causing this corn to look so weak up here. But this is an even better example of no weeds, because this has been small like this the whole year. It's still small, letting lots of sunlight in here. And look what we got for weeds, nothing. I mean, like there's one little grass thing coming up here, that's nothing. And look at how open this is, and there's nothing for weeds. All right, I'll take you down to the next plot before this video turns into too long. So yeah, this is your last look at this spot. All right, so here's the little triangle plot. This stuff, actually the first 4 rows right here is silage corn. And the rest of it's all the same field corn as the other plot was. That's why if you look up, these ones haven't quite tasseled yet. There's a couple tassels poking through. You can see these ears. This silage corn I think is a little bit longer maturing. I'm not sure the exact total days. But then right here is where it switches to the field corn. See all these got up there at tassels. And they're right about the same stage as the other plot was. Dropping all kinds of pollen right now. Same thing down in here. Never sprayed this other than the day of planting. And nothing is coming up. Nothing has came up. Pretty amazing. And obviously this plot being out here in the sun looks quite a bit better. A lot of these corn plants have 2 ears, at least half of them in here. I don't know, like this one will probably turn into something. It's already pretty good size along with the main one. But then there's a lot of them with the second one. It probably won't do much, but maybe. And same thing in here. I got one wide row, like 38-inch row. This is how wide our planter is. And then when I came back through, I put a tighter row, probably like a about a 20-inch row here. This one looks like about a 30-inch, maybe slightly less. I like how this planter is like 38 inches. It's nice to have these wide rows because the deer love walking down these wide rows too. I mean, they're darn near 10 inches wider than a normal farmer's corn around here. And you can see there is some blank spots, like nothing came up here, nothing came up right here, right there. But for the most part, most of this field came up really nice and even emergence. Everything came up. So I know when I was planting, I was checking in the furrow in the crack of the ground here, trying to show you the seeds, and I could see that some of them weren't quite getting in the soil where most of them were. And I just cannot believe the weed control with the rye and the pre-emergent. It's just amazing that nothing ever came up. So yeah, this is looking like a pretty good optional way for me to plant corn occasionally here and there, in these kind of small off to the side odd plots. I might try one of my bigger fields eventually, but this rye does not grow that good in a lot of the black ground like we have out there. I tried broadcasting it and putting it in, and it just didn't. It was turning purple, and in the spring it just did not come in good. Some of it got flooded out, I think, and this rye needs to rye or wheat needs to be on nice, well-drained soil, but the corn's doing fine out there in that swamp black ground. But that's because it was planted later, you know. It didn't have to go through the flooding in the spring and all the whatnot. So anyways, hope you enjoyed this little video. I know I sure did. This is kind of neat. Plant corn like this. I just cannot believe the weed control. Like I said, I've been battling weeds like crazy in some of my other plots, and here I didn't have to do a thing other than the day I planted it. It was the only work needed to plant this plot. So yeah, pretty amazing, pretty easy way to grow corn here if you got the right equipment. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'll have pretty soon I'll be getting my brassica videos out, so yeah, see you in one of those, I guess.